Close your eyes and let the present world fade away. Leave behind the hum of cities, the rhythm of clocks, the voices of people, and step backward, not by centuries, not by millennia, but by billions of years. We descend into an age older than memory, older than fossils, older than the breath of air you draw in this very moment. We are entering the Archean Eon, more than 4 billion years in the past. The Earth then was not the Earth you know. It was a place raw and unshaped, a world in the process of becoming. The oceans stretched endlessly, vast and alien, their waters tinted with minerals, heavy with the chemical ingredients of beginnings. The skies above were cloaked in strange colors, no bright blue dome, but a haze of copper, amber and gray, drifting with gases that would choke modern life, yet nurtured the first sparks of creation. Sunlight filtered weakly through that haze, turning the oceans into a shifting mirror of dull reds and golds. Yet beneath this quiet surface, a secret strength pulsed, for while the seas shimmered and the air hung heavy, the Earth's heart burned fiercely. Beneath the thin crust of rock that had managed to harden, rivers of molten stone still churned. The mantle heaved with energy, heat rising relentlessly from the planet's fiery depths. The crust, that fragile skin stretched across the body of the Earth, was delicate, fractured, and restless. Picture it, the surface of the Earth at this time is like a thin sheet of ice spread across a steaming lake. It looks solid, yet beneath it pressure builds, bubbles swell, and cracks spread slowly, silently. The ground you would stand upon is not secure. It hums with tension, as if the planet itself is holding its breath, preparing for something immense. And on this crust, the first rafts of land had begun to appear. They were not grand continents, but small, jagged fragments, the earliest cratons, the seeds of the continents we walk upon today. They floated like stone ships on a sea of fire, drifting, breaking, reforming. Imagine standing upon one of these lonely pieces of land. Around you stretches nothing but endless water, dark and deep, flecked with mist and steam. The shoreline is sharp, volcanic, a raw scar of black stone where fire once met water. The air is heavy, almost metallic in taste. Sulfur lingers in every breath, mingling with the tang of iron and the faint, acrid smoke of distant volcanic vents. The winds that stir carry heat, and when they blow across the surface of the oceans, they leave trails of steam rising like ghostly banners. The world is alive, yet it feels as though it is sleeping, gathering its energy for the first great stirring. If you listen closely, there is a sound beneath the silence, a deep, slow hum, as though the Earth has a heartbeat. It is not the sound of animals, for none exist yet. It is not the sound of trees rustling, for forests have not yet grown. It is the sound of the mantle itself, stone shifting, magma moving, pressure building, a voice without words, a rhythm older than life. This was the cradle of stone, a place where the first hard surface of the Earth had finally formed, thin and fragile though it was. It marked a turning point, the moment when the Earth began to wear the first outlines of the continents to come. The seas lapped at their shores, the winds swept across their barren ridges, and though no eyes yet saw them, they stood as the earliest landmarks of a world still shaping itself. And in this cradle, promise stirred. These small rafts of rock, these drifting fragments of crust, would not remain isolated forever. They would collide, break apart, and come together again in an eternal dance. They would rise to form mountains, sink to open oceans, and provide the foundations upon which life itself would cling and grow. But for now, they rested in the silence of a young Earth, patient, enduring, waiting for the stirrings of the deep to awaken them. The Earth was quiet, yes, but it was not still. Beneath the cradle of stone, fire waited, restless and unyielding, and soon the stillness would shatter. Beneath the oceans of the Archean world, silence was never truly silence. Though the waters stretched calm and endless to the horizon, and though no fish stirred their depths and no whales sang within them, there was a murmur that lingered in the unseen places below. It was not a murmur of life, but of stone, a whisper of pressure, of heat, of forces gathering their strength in secret. Imagine descending now beneath those heavy waves. The sunlight that filters weakly through the copper-tinted skies does not reach far here. Within only a few meters, the glow fades to dim green. Within a few dozen meters, there is only shadow. And far below, in the depths, only darkness remains. Yet it is not a dead darkness. The seafloor shifts and breathes. The crust bends and strains, like the boards of a wooden ship groaning under stress. From the mantle, hidden rivers of molten rock press upward. They twist and flow, invisible to the surface world, pressing against the crust as though seeking escape. Where the stone is weakest, they bulge upward, pushing at the Earth's skin. At first, these movements are quiet, almost imperceptible, but like the first breath of wind that precedes a storm, they are signs of what is to come. Think of the planet now as a great animal, drowsing but restless. Its body is warm, its heart is strong, and its skin is beginning to itch and stir. The mantle whispers to the crust, urging it to move, to fracture, to give way. And slowly, reluctantly, the crust begins to listen. Cracks form in the seabed, faint at first, but soon widening. They run like jagged scars across the stone floor of the ocean. Through these cracks, heat escapes in the form of faint plumes, shimmering clouds rising upward into the water. Bubbles of gas, strange and ancient, drift lazily toward the surface, breaking with soft pops that no creature yet hears. Each one is a message from the deep, a signal that the planet is alive and speaking in the only voice it knows. Above, the ocean responds. The water near these cracks warms, swirling in slow, unseen currents. Minerals dissolve and drift into the darkness, enriching the seas with their quiet gifts. The ocean becomes a listener in this exchange, accepting what the mantle releases, carrying it across the world. And in these whispers, something else stirs. They are more than just sounds of stone and heat. They are invitations. For in these plumes and fissures, in these hidden exchanges between fire and water, the first hints of life will one day find their home. But here, in the early Archean, the whispers are only that, possibilities, carried on currents, waiting for the right moment. Imagine yourself standing, or perhaps floating, in this dark ocean. The water is warm around you, carrying faint vibrations. If you press your hand to the seafloor, you feel it tremble gently, as though the planet is shifting in its sleep. Small rumbles echo through the stone, like a drumbeat far away. It is not violent, not yet. It is patient, a rhythm you could almost fall asleep to, steady and deep. The whispers are everywhere. Some come as faint groans of stone under strain, others as muffled booms as gases escape from beneath. They rise through the oceans, brushing against the surface like secret songs. And above, where the rafts of rock drift across the seas, these whispers are felt as subtle tremors beneath the feet. The earliest hints that the Earth, though quiet, will not remain so forever. This is how tectonic activity begins, not with thunder, not with roaring mountains, but with soft murmurs beneath the waves, with whispers that hint at the power beneath. The Earth is speaking, but only in fragments. Only those who listen closely would notice. And though no life yet has ears to hear, the song continues, patient, steady, eternal. In these whispers lies a promise that the Earth will not remain smooth and still, that the seas will not forever reign unbroken. Mountains will rise, oceans will deepen, continents will drift. The world is stirring, its voice growing louder with each passing age. And so the whispers beneath the waves linger on, hidden in darkness, soft but insistent. The Earth is restless, and soon its voice will grow too strong to be ignored. The whispers beneath the waves did not remain whispers forever. Pressure is a patient sculptor, but it does not wait without end. For millions upon millions of years, the heat of the mantle pressed upward, swelling against the thin crust, straining against its fragile bonds. And at last, the stone could bear no more. The first fractures were subtle, barely perceptible in the beginning. Imagine cracks spreading through the seabed like the hairline lines that spread across cooling glass. They were not violent, not yet, but inevitable, the Earth's surface bending, giving way to the immense energy from below. They opened in darkness, deep beneath the oceans, far from the gaze of the sun. At first, these fractures were narrow, just thin veins of weakness in the crust. But slowly, with each surge of magma beneath, they widened. Rock groaned under the strain, echoing through the waters like the rumble of thunder far away. It was a sound without witnesses, for no creature yet swam in those seas, but if you were there, if you could listen closely, you would hear the Earth's voice, low and resonant, speaking in cracks and rumbles. Through these fractures, the hidden fire of the mantle found its escape. Plumes of molten rock surged upward, breaking free at last. They burst into the oceans, glowing rivers of magma spilling into the dark waters, their heat sending pillars of steam and vapor upward. Imagine the sight, black waves boiling and churning as fiery fountains tore through the crust, painting the ocean floor with glowing rivers of red and orange. And yet, even as violent as it may sound, there was also a strange tranquility to it. For these eruptions were not chaos, but creation. Each fracture carved the blueprint of tomorrow's world. Each line in the stone was a sketch of continents yet to be, of mountains yet to rise, of valleys and oceans yet to open. Picture standing upon one of those ancient stone rafts, feeling the tremors beneath your feet. The ground quivers, the air thickens with sulfurous steam, and far below, you know the crust is tearing itself apart. In the distance, across the endless horizon of water, faint glows mark the birth of new volcanic islands, rising like beacons in the mist. The earth is no longer silent. It is restless, and its restlessness is written into every crack and fissure. These first fractures are the beginning of tectonics as we know it. They are the first outlines of the plates, vast slabs of rock that will drift and collide for billions of years to come. Though small and primitive, they are the ancestors of the plates that carry our modern continents, the bones of the earth set in motion. But at this moment, long before eyes or minds exist to wonder at it, the fractures are simply part of the planet's natural rhythm. A release of pressure, a deep exhale from within. The crust splits, magma pours out, new stone hardens, and in time the cycle repeats. Creation and destruction forever intertwined. And through it all, the Earth's heartbeat grows louder. What was once a whisper beneath the waves has become a song of cracking stone and rising fire. The fractures spread like veins across the seafloor, carrying with them the first clear signs that the Earth is alive, not merely as a planet of rock and water, but as a moving, shifting, restless world. In these fractures, the story of tectonic activity truly begins. The Earth has spoken, not in whispers now, but in cracks and fire, in movements that will shape the face of the world for all time. When the first fractures tore through the seabed, the Earth's hidden fire spilled forth in rivers of molten stone. Imagine vast fountains of lava erupting into the dark waters of the Archean oceans, each eruption a meeting of two ancient forces, fire and water. It was a meeting as old as the planet itself, and yet, here in the Archean, it found its first great stage. Picture the scene beneath the waves. A fissure opens in the crust, glowing like a wound in the ocean floor. From it, magma surges upward, a luminous current of red and gold. The water around it boils instantly, exploding into clouds of steam that rush toward the surface. Bubbles of gas escape in torrents, spiraling upward like ghostly lanterns in the black water. The glow spreads, lighting the seafloor in eerie, flickering hues. Where once there was only darkness, there is now a shimmering realm of fire. Above, the ocean trembles. Waves ripple outward, disturbed by the eruptions far below. Steam bursts through the surface, rising in towering plumes. If you stood at the edge of one of the drifting stone rafts, you would see columns of vapor climbing into the copper sky, glowing faintly as sunlight caught their mist. The air would be heavy with heat, metallic with the taste of sulfur, thick with the scent of minerals carried on the wind. And yet amid this violence there is beauty. The oceans and the fire are not enemies here, they are dance partners. The water tempers the fury of the magma, cooling it, hardening it into new stone. Each eruption does not only destroy but creates. New islands rise from the waves, jagged and black, their surfaces still warm from the fire that birthed them. They stand as fragile newborns, destined to grow, erode, and be reborn in the endless cycle of tectonic life. Imagine watching this process over centuries or even millennia. A vent erupts, building an island of fresh stone. Waves crash upon it, wearing it down grain by grain. Storms sweep across it, carrying fragments into the sea. And then from the same vent, another eruption builds the land anew. It is a rhythm of fire and water, destruction and renewal, repeated endlessly until the island hardens, joins other fragments, and becomes part of a larger landmass. Beneath the water, the story continues. Where magma cools too quickly to rise as islands, it hardens into long ridges along the seafloor. These ridges, glowing with heat, stretch across the ocean floor like great scars of fire. Along them, minerals seep into the waters, turning the deep into a cauldron rich with the ingredients of life. Even though no eyes yet gaze upon it, this is a moment of promise, the world preparing the ground, or rather the sea, for the life that will come. The oceans themselves respond to these fiery gifts. Currents shift, carrying warmth and minerals to distant places. Clouds of ash and steam drift across the seas, shading the seas in copper tones. Every eruption reshapes not only the seafloor, but the atmosphere, the climate, the balance of heat and cold. Fire and water together weave the fabric of the Archean world. And in the quiet moments between eruptions, there is peace. The new islands, black and jagged, rest in the still waters. Steam drifts gently from their surfaces, curling into the hazy sky. The seas lap at their shores, whispering against the fresh stone. To stand there would be to feel the breath of creation itself, the warmth of fire beneath, the cool embrace of water above, the endless dance between the two. This is the world the fractures have birthed, a place where oceans and fire meet in an eternal dialogue. Each eruption is a verse in a song that will continue for billions of years, shaping the continents, feeding the seas, nurturing the beginnings of life. It is a song of balance, of contrasts held together, the fury of fire softened by the calm of water, the vastness of the seas enriched by the gifts of the earth's burning heart. And as the cycles repeat, as fire and water shape the world together, the earth's restlessness grows bolder. The fractures widen, the plates begin to stir, and the dance of creation moves toward something greater still. The earth was learning to move. What had begun as whispers beneath the waves, what had grown into fractures and eruptions, was now becoming something larger, a slow and patient motion across the face of the world. The crust of the Archean, thin and fragile though it was, had begun to drift. Like rafts of bark on a restless pond, the great slabs of stone moved across the oceans, pulled and pushed by the fire beneath. Imagine the Earth's surface as a skin stretched across a living body. It is not still, not fixed, but always in quiet motion. Beneath it, the mantle churns, a vast, slow river of molten rock flowing in currents as steady as tides, as eternal as breath. These currents press upward in some places, spreading the crust apart, while in others they drag it downward, pulling it back toward the depths. The crust responds, sliding, drifting, shifting, never still, always restless. To see it from above, if such a view were possible, would be like watching giant puzzle pieces shuffle slowly across a table. Each fragment of crust moves at its own pace, colliding gently with its neighbors, pulling away to reveal dark wounds of the ocean, or grinding past one another in long, silent struggles. It is a motion too slow for a moment's eye to catch, but stretched over millions of years, the drift becomes unmistakable. The earth itself is learning to dance. Picture yourself standing once again on one of those stone rafts. You would not feel the motion beneath your feet in the span of a single day or even a single lifetime. But if you could linger, if you could stay for ages upon ages, you would see the land shift. You would notice shorelines changing, islands drifting apart, mountains sliding closer to one another. The ground itself would seem alive, not fixed, but part of a great, unending journey. And this drifting was not without consequence. Where the plates pulled apart, deep valleys opened on the seafloor, their gaps filled instantly by surging magma. New stone was born here, fresh and black, still warm with the fire of the mantle. These spreading centers glowed beneath the oceans, long lines of volcanic ridges weaving across the seafloor like the stitches of some immense tapestry. Where plates met and pressed together, the opposite happened. One was forced downward, sliding into the depths where it melted, feeding the fires below. The other was pushed upward, crumpling and lifting into ridges and mountains. Though small in this age compared to the towering ranges that would one day exist, they were the first true mountains, the first wrinkles on the face of the earth. And where plates scraped past each other, friction built. The crust shuddered, releasing its energy in quakes that rippled through the oceans. The waves rolled outward, silent in their time, for nothing yet lived to fear them. But each quake, each subtle slip of the plates, was another reminder. The surface of the earth was no longer still. It was a restless, living skin, shaped and reshaped by the ceaseless currents of fire below. The drifting skin of the earth carried more than stone, it carried the promise of life. Along the cracks and ridges, minerals poured into the seas. Along the rising islands, shallow waters formed, warmed by volcanic heat, enriched by the elements of the deep. These were places where chemistry could flourish, where the building blocks of life could gather, combine, and take their first tentative steps toward being. There is a quiet poetry in this drifting. The crust is not merely breaking or burning, it is wandering. Each plate is like a traveler with no map, guided only by the unseen hands of the mantle's currents. Over ages, they will meet and part, sometimes gently, sometimes violently, always changing, always shaping the world anew. And though no mind yet exists to wonder at it, The drifting skin of the Earth is laying the foundation for everything that will follow, for continents and seas, for weather and climate, for the living tapestry that will one day cover the globe. In this movement, the Earth is no longer simply a world of stone and water. It is becoming dynamic, alive in its own way. Its skin drifts, its bones shift, and its voice grows louder. The planet has begun its endless journey of change, a journey that will never cease. And in this age, the Archean Age, we witness its first steps, slow, deliberate, but filled with promise. The drifting skin of the Earth is the beginning of the continents, the quiet stirrings of mountains, the slow reordering of oceans. It is the sign that the Earth is awake, aware in its own deep way, and ready to shape the ages to come. As the drifting skin of the Earth shuffled and collided, something new and marvelous began to rise. From the patient dance of stone upon stone, the first mountains emerged. They were not yet the towering ranges we know today, not the mighty Himalayas or the snow-capped Andes, but small, jagged ridges, the Earth's first attempts at sculpting its surface skyward. These were mountains in their infancy, newborn giants compared to the flatness that had come before. Imagine two rafts of stone drifting across the Archean seas. For countless ages they float apart, moving gently on the mantle's currents. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, they begin to approach. The space between them shrinks, the oceans shift, and at last they meet. The crust does not simply stop, it crumples. One plate is forced downward into the fiery depths, swallowed by the mantle. The other bends, folds, and rises, pushed skyward by the immense pressure. At that moment, a mountain was born. The first mountains were raw and jagged, their slopes black with fresh volcanic rock. They had no soil, no trees, no rivers winding down their sides. They stood bare against the hazy sky, smoking and steaming from their fiery birth. Their peaks, though not as high as later ranges, must have seemed immense against the endless flatness of the seas. They were the first true landmarks of the Earth, shapes that broke the horizon, giving form to a world that had been mostly ocean and sky. Picture standing at the base of one of these infant mountains. Around you, the ground trembles with the strain of colliding plates. The air carries the acrid taste of volcanic gases, sharp and biting in your throat. From the cracks in the stone, heat pours upward, and thin streams of molten rock spill down the slopes, glowing like rivers of light in the dimness. Steam rises where lava meets water, cloaking the base of the mountain in shifting veils of mist. It is a harsh, alien beauty, a world of fire and stone unlike anything we know today. And yet there is also a strange calm. The mountain does not roar with its creation. It simply stands, growing slowly, pushed upward by forces deep and unseen. Over time, its ridges sharpen, its cliffs stretch higher, and its base spreads outward, anchoring it against the restless sea. It is as though the Earth is learning to breathe through stone, exhaling its energy into shapes that rise toward the heavens. These infant mountains did more than break the horizon, they reshaped the oceans around them. As the land lifted, shallow seas formed at their edges, pools of water warmed by volcanic heat and enriched with minerals carried from the deep. These coastal zones, though barren of plants or animals, became cradles of possibility. The chemistry of life found shelter here, nurtured by the warmth of the land and the gifts of the Earth's interior. In the shadow of the mountains, the first sparks of biology would one day take hold. The mountains also began to teach the Earth about balance. For every rise there was erosion. Rain did not yet fall as it does today, but the oceans were relentless. Waves pounded against the newborn cliffs, breaking fragments free, grinding them into sand. Wind, carrying dust and ash, scoured their surfaces. In this constant wear, the mountains learned the rhythm that would last forever. To grow is to be worn down, to rise is to be humbled, to exist is to be shaped by time. Seen over millions of years, the mountains were not still. They shifted, cracked, and even disappeared. Some were swallowed again into the mantle, their glory brief but powerful. Others persisted, their cores becoming the ancient cratons that form the backbone of today's continents. Though they seemed fragile in their infancy, many of these mountains left behind roots of stone so deep, so enduring, that they remain with us still, billions of years later. These first mountains were not just geological features, they were symbols of the Earth's awakening power. From the drifting of the plates came a collision, from the collision came an uplift, and from uplift came from shapes rising from formlessness, stone reaching toward the sky. The Earth was sculpting itself, learning to create landscapes, learning to write its story not just in oceans and fractures, but in ridges, peaks, and valleys. To imagine them is to imagine the Earth's first attempts at beauty, raw, violent, unfinished, yes, but also magnificent. Against the haze of the Archean sky, these mountains stood as the first bold strokes of a painter upon a blank canvas. They were the beginning of topography, of landmarks, of the very idea of place. And though no eyes yet gazed upon them, they were waiting, patient, for life to come and call them home. Far below the surface of the Archean oceans, along the seams where the Earth's crust pulled apart, something remarkable was stirring. Where fractures split the seafloor, molten rock pressed close to the water, heating it, forcing it to rise. From these wounds in the Earth, streams of superheated water burst forth, carrying with them minerals drawn from the very bones of the planet. These were the first hydrothermal vents, towering chimneys of stone, rising like strange castles in the deep, exhaling the breath of the Earth into the dark waters. Imagine descending now into that darkness. The surface world fades away, the dim copper light of the sun extinguished by layer upon layer of ocean. Soon you find yourself in a realm where no sunlight reaches, where shadows rule and silence presses in on every side. Yet as you drift deeper, the silence is broken. A low rumble fills the waters, a steady exhalation. And there, glowing faintly in the distance, the vents appear. They rise like towers of stone, built not by hands but by the slow layering of minerals. Water, heated to scalding temperatures by the mantle's fire, jets from their mouths in great clouds. Some are black smokers, releasing plumes so thick and dark they curl like smoke from chimneys, rich with iron and sulfur. Others are white smokers, their plumes pale, shimmering, almost ghost-like, carrying calcium and silica in their streams. Together, they paint the deep in colors of the unseen world, a strange alchemy of fire and water at play. Around these vents, the ocean seethes. The waters shimmer with heat, currents swirl unpredictably, and minerals fall like fine dust, settling into strange mounds and ridges. The vents do not simply release heat, they sculpt the seafloor around them, building strange landscapes of stone that rise higher with each eruption. To stand here would be to witness an alien world, both beautiful and unsettling, where the planet itself breathes directly into the sea. And though no fish, no crabs, no shimmering schools of life yet gather here, the vents already whisper promises. Their plumes are rich with elements essential to chemistry: iron, sulfur, magnesium, manganese, and more. The very waters are laced with the raw materials that one day will feed life's first spark. The heat creates gradients of temperature, pockets where reactions can occur. The vents, though silent to us, are laboratories of creation, crucibles of possibility. Picture the cycle. Water seeps down into the crust through cracks in the seafloor. There it meets magma-heated stone, rising to temperatures beyond boiling. It dissolves minerals, carrying them upward. Then, bursting back into the ocean, it releases its load in a flood of heat and elements. The process repeats endlessly, a rhythm as steady as the beating of a heart. The Earth's own circulatory system, hidden beneath the waves. The chimneys themselves grow like living things. Each burst of minerals adds another layer, another ring of stone. Some collapse under their own weight, crumbling into rubble. Others stand tall for millennia, monuments to the patient exhalations of the deep. From afar, they look almost like forests of stone, pillars and spires, rising silently in the darkness, clustered together along the seams of the seafloor. And in time, these places will become havens. Life, when it stirs, will find in these vents warmth, shelter, and nourishment. Tiny organisms will cling to their sides, thriving in the mineral-rich plumes. Entire ecosystems will bloom in the shadows, communities of creatures that need no sunlight, only the gifts of the Earth's fire. But here in the Archean, that story has not yet begun. For now, the vents stand alone, lonely giants, sculpting the deep in anticipation of what is to come. To imagine them is to imagine the Earth breathing underwater. Each plume is an exhale of heat, a sigh of stone into water. Each mineral-rich cloud is a whisper of the future, a promise that the Earth's restlessness will not only shape mountains and continents, but will also provide the cradle where life can flourish. The first superheated vents were not accidents. They were the natural outcome of a restless planet, of a skin that drifts and cracks, of fire pressing upward and water pressing down. They were the inevitable meeting place of Earth's two most ancient elements, fire and water, bound together in a dialogue that will last for billions of years. And though no eyes yet gaze upon them, though no ears yet hear their song, these vents mark the beginning of something profound. They are not just features of geology, they are the Earth's first gift to life. In the stillness of the Archean oceans, warmed by the breath of the first superheated vents, the stage was set for something entirely new. Until now, the world had been a canvas of stone and water, painted with the colors of fire and ash. But within the hidden corners of these vents, within the shallow seas at the edges of newborn mountains, something began to stir, something delicate, fragile, and yet enduring. This was the dawn of life, whispered first in the language of microbes. Picture the scene, the seafloor alive with shimmering plumes of heat, clouds of minerals curling into the dark waters like incense rising into the night. Each plume carried with it sulfur, iron, and other elements, drifting outward into the surrounding seas. Around the chimneys of stone, the waters were neither too hot nor too cold, but just right, small zones of balance in a world otherwise harsh and unforgiving. In these in-between places, chemistry had room to play. Imagine tiny, invisible structures forming within the mineral-laden waters. Simple chains of molecules, fragile as spider silk, drawn together by the currents of heat and minerals. They clustered in sheltered cracks, in quiet pools in the warm embrace of stone. They're shielded from the chaos of the open ocean, they began to persist. At first, they were little more than patterns of matter, simple, repeating shapes. But over time, they grew more complex, more ordered, more alive. The vents became their cradles. In the shimmering plumes, energy was abundant, and minerals provided food for the earliest experiments of life. The cracks of the ocean floor became tiny nurseries where molecules tried and failed, broke apart and reformed, until at last, something endured. The first microbes, simple, single-celled beings, clung to the rocks, feeding on the strange chemistry of the deep. They were small beyond imagination, yet in their smallness, they held the power to change the world forever. It is a strange thought that life, everything we know, everything that has ever been might have begun here, in the shadows of black smokers rising from the Archean seafloor, that the first breath of biology was not taken under the sun, but in the warmth of the Earth's own fire, in a place where no light could reach. And yet, here it was, forming quietly, invisibly, shaping the destiny of the planet. Now imagine yourself drifting near one of these vents. Around you, the water is dark, yet alive with movement. The chimneys exhale their hot clouds, and within those clouds, something unseen clings and multiplies. You cannot see them, but they are there, tiny microbes, living off the minerals, thriving where no life should thrive. They form thin films on the stone, invisible mats that shimmer faintly with the minerals they absorb. Each one is a miracle of endurance, a tiny defiance of the lifelessness that ruled the world before. But it was not only in the deep that life found its first cradles. Along the edges of rising islands and infant mountains, shallow seas gathered. Warm pools formed in cracks and basins, filled with water enriched by volcanic gases and heated by stone. In these pools, too, the building blocks of life gathered. Droplets formed on the edges of rocks, dried by heat, and then washed again by the tides. Each cycle gave molecules another chance to combine, to experiment, to find stability. Slowly, through countless repetitions, order arose. The world was vast, and life was small, but these cradles were enough. In every vent, in every pool, in every sheltered place where fire and water met in balance, tiny sparks of biology took hold. They were not yet plants or animals, not yet the great forests or creatures that would come much later, but they were alive. And life, once begun, does not easily end. Think of it, the mountains rose, the oceans churned, the vents roared, and all the while, unseen by any eye, the microbes endured. They spread slowly, clinging to rocks, drifting in currents, multiplying in silence. No sound marked their arrival, no sudden change struck the world above. And yet beneath the waves, everything had changed. For with life, the Earth was no longer simply a planet of stone and water. It had become something more, a living world. These microbes were the pioneers, the first wanderers of a new frontier. They did not know it, but they had begun a story that would stretch across billions of years, a story that would one day include forests, rivers, creatures, and people. But for now, they lived quietly in their cradles, nourished by vents and warmed by fire, shaping the future one invisible breath at a time. And though they were small, though they seemed insignificant, the Earth itself seemed to hold them close, as though it knew that in these fragile beginnings lay its greatest promise. The first cradles of microbial life were the planet's first gift to itself, and from them, the world would never again be the same. The Earth had always been alive with fire. From its very birth, it had burned within a furnace of molten stone and restless heat. But in the Archean, as tectonic plates drifted and collided, as vents roared in the deep, this fire found new ways to speak. It exhaled not only through lava and steam, but also through the air itself. The planet began to breathe, not with lungs, but with volcanoes, geysers, and the ceaseless stirring of its mantle. Imagine the horizon of the Archean world. Jagged islands, newborn and black, rise from the seas. Their flanks glow faintly with rivers of molten rock, sliding down into the waves. Above them, the sky swirls with plumes of smoke and ash, carried upward by volcanic breaths. Every eruption is a voice, a sudden shout of heat and stone, followed by a long sigh as gases drift into the air. The Earth, in its infancy, spoke in fire. What did it exhale? Not oxygen, not yet. Instead, the planet's breath was heavy with carbon dioxide, methane, sulfur dioxide, and ammonia. Gases that to us would be harsh, suffocating, even deadly, but to the Archean Earth they were the stuff of balance. They formed a blanket around the planet, holding warmth close, keeping the oceans from freezing beneath the faint light of the young sun. Without them, the Earth might have lain in silence, locked in ice. But with them, it lived in warmth, its seas restless and alive. Picture standing on one of those volcanic shores. Around you, the air trembles with heat, shimmering in waves. The smell is sharp, metallic, and acrid, a biting mixture of sulfur and smoke. Steam hisses from cracks in the stone, curling into the air. And then, with a roar, the mountain above erupts, spilling fire into the sky. Ash billows upward, darkening the light of the sun. Molten stone pours down in glowing streams, meeting the ocean in a hiss of steam and boiling foam. You can feel the Earth's exhale on your skin, hot, heavy, undeniable. But these breaths were not simply destruction. They were gifts. Every plume of volcanic gas carried with it carbon and nitrogen, elements essential to the chemistry of life. Every eruption enriched the air and sea, spreading nutrients across the world. The very breath of the Earth became food for the microbes clinging to rocks, sheltering in shallow pools, or drifting near the vents. What would one day be poison to larger creatures was, in these first ages, nourishment to the smallest of beings. And it was not only the air that changed. The gases drifting upward thickened the atmosphere, cloaking the planet in a dense haze. Sunlight filtered through it weakly, painting the world in shades of amber and red. From afar, the Earth would not have looked blue and green, as it does now, but bronze and smoky, wrapped in the breath of its own fire. This veil may have seemed strange, even alien, but it was protection. It kept the Earth warm beneath a dim young sun, shielding the oceans, cradling the fragile sparks of life. Think of the rhythm of it. Volcanoes roar, ash rises, gases spread across the sky, and the world breathes a little heavier. Then quiet returns, the ash drifts down, the seas cool, and life continues its unseen work. Over millions of years, this cycle repeats again and again. With each breath of fire, the Earth reshapes its climate, its oceans, its very chemistry. It is as though the planet itself is alive, inhaling and exhaling through the language of volcanoes. And the microbes responded. Those that lived near vents and shores learned to feed upon sulfur, to draw energy from the minerals released in the Earth's breath. In their silent persistence, they turned what seemed like poison into sustenance. Each eruption, each plume of smoke, became not an ending, but an opportunity. The bond between the Earth and its first children deepened, a dialogue of fire and life, stone and cell. There is something strangely comforting in this image. A world that to us would seem hostile, its air choking, its seas boiling with heat, its sky heavy with smoke, was in truth a nurturing place. It was a cradle warmed by fire, enriched by gases, protected by haze. The Earth's breath of fire, though fierce, was an embrace. It held the planet close, shielded it against the coldness of the cosmos, and whispered to life, "Stay, grow, endure." Over time, this breathing shaped the path of the world. The gases that filled the sky laid the groundwork for the changes to come. They prepared the atmosphere for the day when microbes would release their own breath, when oxygen would rise for the first time. But here, in the Archean, the Earth still ruled with its fiery exhale. Each plume was a promise, each eruption a reminder that the planet was alive, restless, and deeply generous. The Earth did not breathe as we do, in quick, fleeting inhalations, but in vast cycles of fire and gas, measured not in seconds, but in eons. And in every one of those breaths, the future was waiting. The Archean Earth was not a fixed and silent world. Its crust was alive, restless, always shifting. The great rafts of stone, the plates of the planet, had begun their long migrations, drifting across the face of the oceans with patient slowness. They carried with them fragments of land, the earliest seeds of continents. And though these continents were small, scattered, and raw, they had begun a journey that would never end, the endless drift of stone across time. Imagine these first fragments. They were not yet the wide continents we know, not the sprawling expanse of Africa, not the vastness of Asia, not even the smaller continents of today. Instead, they were cratons, ancient, stable cores of rock, hard as diamond, born from the fiery crucible of volcanoes and tectonic collisions. These cratons were small and isolated, islands in a sea that seemed endless, but they were strong. They would endure when other lands sank, when mountains crumbled, when oceans closed. They were the bones of continents, the first roots of land that would last for billions of years. Now picture them drifting. Slowly, with the passage of ages, they moved across the oceans, pulled by the unseen currents of the mantle. At times they collided, fusing into larger masses of land. At other times they drifted apart, scattered by the same currents that had brought them together. Their journeys were measured not in years, but in millions upon millions of years. What seemed motionless to the eye was, over time, a grand migration across the globe. Imagine standing upon one of these newborn continents. Around you, the land is harsh, black with volcanic stone, jagged with mountains only just born. There are no trees, no grasses, not even moss to soften the ground. But there is stability. Unlike the small volcanic islands that rose and sank with eruptions, these cratons were steady. Their roots extended deep into the earth, anchoring them against the restlessness of the mantle. To stand here was to stand on something enduring, something that would one day form the heart of entire continents. The drift of these cratons reshaped the oceans. Where they parted, new seafloor spread behind them, glowing ridges forming in their wake. Where they collided, shallow seas vanished, squeezed away by rising land. The oceans were never still, always redrawing their borders as the continents wandered. To the microbes that lived along the shores, the world must have seemed in constant change. New coasts forming, old ones vanishing, shallow waters giving way to the deep. There is a quiet poetry to this drift. The continents were like travelers, wandering across the face of the earth with no destination, guided only by the mantle's deep and patient hand. They met like strangers, collided, broke apart, and drifted once again into solitude. Each meeting reshaped the world, each parting left echoes in stone. Over billions of years, they would form supercontinents and break them apart, a rhythm of gathering and scattering that continues to this very day. And with each shift, life was given new opportunities. The shallow seas along drifting coasts were nurseries of chemistry, warmed by sunlight and enriched by minerals. When land masses collided, new environments were created, lakes, basins, ridges where life could cling. When they parted, oceans expanded, carrying nutrients far and wide. The drifting of continents was not only a geological dance, but a gift to biology, scattering the stage upon which life would play its story. Think of the patience of it. A continent might move only a few centimeters in a year, less than the length of your hand. Yet over millions of years, those centimeters became thousands of kilometers. Mountains rose, seas shifted, climates changed. The world that seemed unchanging to any single moment was, in truth, always moving, always remaking itself. And through it all, the cratons endured. Some of the very stones that formed in the Archean, in those drifting fragments, still exist today. Beneath Canada, Greenland, Australia, and parts of Africa, the roots of these ancient lands remain relics of a time when the Earth was young, when the first continent set sail across its seas. To touch them today is to place your hand upon the oldest bones of the planet, to feel the memory of that long drift within the stone itself. The long drift of continents is the Earth's great story of patience. It is the tale of movement so slow it feels like stillness, of change so vast it shapes the destiny of oceans, climates, and life itself. In the Archean, this story was only beginning, whispered first in the wandering of small cratons. Yet from those quiet beginnings came the great cycles of supercontinents and oceans, the stage upon which all of life's drama would one day unfold. The Earth was not fixed. It was a traveler, a wanderer, always in motion. And the continents, carried upon its drifting skin, were the first companions in that endless journey. As the drifting cratons wandered across the Archean oceans, something new began to appear at their edges. Where land met water, the first true shores were born. These coasts were not soft with sand or lined with forests as we know them today. They were rugged and raw, jagged cliffs of black volcanic stone rising sharply from the waves, yet in their starkness they held beauty. They marked the first boundaries between sea and land, the first places where water paused before stone and stone gave way to water. Imagine these shores under the Archean sky. The seas crash against sharp rocks, sending spray into the air, mist mixing with the heavy haze of volcanic gases. The tide surges and retreats, not yet pulled by a moon, for the moon itself, still young and closer to the earth than today, tugged the oceans with far greater force. The tides were wild, immense, washing far inland, then rushing back again with thunderous power. Each cycle shaped the coasts, carving cracks in the stone, wearing cliffs down into rubble, scattering fragments across the water's edge. Over time, these fragments became the earliest beaches, not beaches of soft sand, but of course gravel and broken shards of volcanic glass. The waves tumbled them endlessly, smoothing their edges, grinding them into smaller pieces. Grain by grain, the first sands began to form. To walk here would have been to walk across sharp black pebbles, warmed by the sun, steaming with the heat of fresh eruptions. Yet it was here, in these tidal zones, that possibility lingered. The seas themselves were restless partners in this shaping. Each drift of a continent changed the direction of currents, creating new shorelines, new inlets, new shallow bays. In some places, the land sank slowly into the sea, forming wide, flat tidal flats where water pooled and evaporated with the rising heat of the day. In others, the land lifted, pushing against the ocean to form cliffs and ridges. The outline of the Earth's surface was never the same for long. Every age brought new shapes, new patterns, new coasts upon which the waves would fall. And in these places, the chemistry of life found fertile ground. The tidal pools, warmed by sunlight and rich with minerals from volcanic rock, became natural laboratories. Water evaporated, concentrating the chemicals within. When the tide returned, it replenished what was lost, mixing the old with the new. Again and again, the cycle repeated, giving molecules countless chances to combine, to experiment, to persist. Along the shores of the Archean, life's earliest whispers grew louder. Picture one of these tidal pools, nestled in a hollow of stone at the edge of a newborn continent. The water within it shimmers with warmth, its surface rippling in the wind. Around its edges, crystals form as minerals dry in the sun, only to dissolve once more when the tide returns. Tiny organic molecules, invisible to the eye, drift within, colliding, splitting, and reforming. No sound marks their dance, no movement reveals their presence, but in their quiet work, they are shaping the future. The shaping of shores was not only a gift to life, but also to the Earth itself. The coasts became boundaries where forces met, water eroding stone, stone resisting water, both locked in a rhythm of give and take. The continents were sculpted here, their edges softened, their outlines carved into new forms. Bays deepened, peninsulas stretched outward, islands broke away and drifted into the sea. The very face of the Earth was drawn and redrawn with each passing tide. Over millions of years, the process repeated until entire coastlines formed, not the wide, gentle beaches of later ages, but wild, chaotic edges where fire met water in endless conflict. Volcanoes erupted along the shores, spilling lava directly into the seas. New stone hardened, only to be broken again by waves. Mountains rose inland, sending rivers of ash and debris down to the coasts, where they were scattered by the tides. The shores were places of constant change, restless and alive. And yet in this constant change, there was constancy. The waves always returned. The tides always rose and fell. Always the seas reached for the land, and the land resisted, giving ground only to take it back again. In this rhythm, the Earth found its first sense of shape. The outlines of continents, though crude, began to take form. The oceans, though vast, began to be bound by coasts and basins. The Earth was no longer a world of endless water and scattered islands. It was becoming a world of defined places. For the microbes drifting in the seas, clinging to rocks, or multiplying in tidal pools, these shores were havens. Here they found warmth, minerals, and stability. Here they spread, invisible but enduring, covering the stones with thin films of life. The coasts became more than just boundaries between water and land. They became the first homes of life itself, places where existence could root itself against the flow of time. And so the shaping of shores and seas was not merely geology, it was the beginning of landscapes. The Earth was teaching itself how to draw coastlines, how to carve boundaries, how to balance the vastness of water with the solidity of land. Each wave, each tide, each eruption and collapse added a brushstroke to the planet's canvas. Slowly, patiently, the first true face of the Earth began to appear. The drifting of continents, the splitting of seafloor, the rise of mountains, all of these movements carried with them another voice of the Earth. It was a sudden voice, sharp and deep, a voice that shook stone and sea alike. These were the first earthquakes, born from the slow, patient shifting of tectonic plates. They came without warning, invisible until the very moment they struck, when the crust groaned and gave way under the strain of its own restlessness. Imagine a world where no creatures yet walked, no forests grew, no cities trembled. The Earth's surface was bare and raw, and in that emptiness, earthquakes had no audience. They moved through silence, shattering stone in a world without ears to hear them. Yet their presence was felt in every trembling coastline, every fractured ridge, every sudden collapse of rock into the sea. Picture yourself upon one of the early cratons, those ancient fragments of continent drifting across the Archean Ocean. The ground beneath your feet is steady most days, humming quietly with the subtle movements of the mantle. But then, without warning, the stone shifts. A deep groan echoes through the land as pressure, long building, is suddenly released. The ground shudders violently, cracks split open in the rock, and cliffs crumble into the waves below. The earth shakes, not gently, but with a power that reminds you that the crust itself is fragile, forever caught between creation and destruction. In the oceans, the quakes ripple outward. Shockwaves roll through the waters, sending waves crashing against volcanic shores. Some quakes are small, little more than a tremor in the stone. Others are vast, reshaping entire coastlines, splitting islands in two, or collapsing mountainsides into the sea. Each quake is a reminder that the continents are not passengers, but players in the Earth's restless dance. And yet, though violent, these quakes were also part of the Earth's creative rhythm. Each fracture opened new pathways for magma to rise, feeding the volcanoes that built islands and ridges. Each collapse carved new valleys, new basins where water could pool. Even destruction became a kind of sculpting, shaping the contours of the world. The Earth did not fear breaking itself. For every break was a chance to become something new. There is a strange coziness in imagining these earthquakes in a world without people. Today, when the ground shakes, we think of danger, of collapse, of loss. But in the Archean, the quakes were free of witnesses, free of fear. They were simply the earth stretching, sighing, adjusting its restless skin. No one to panic, no one to flee, only stone reshaping stone, ocean against cliff, silence filled with power. Some earthquakes were subtle, rolling through the crust like distant thunder. Others cracked the very ground, leaving scars that stretched for miles. The newborn mountains, sharp and jagged, often split and crumbled under the strain, their slopes collapsing into rubble. Along the coasts, cliffs gave way, tumbling into the ocean in clouds of dust and foam. The land was never fixed, never final, always in motion. And with each quake, the Earth's voice grew louder. It spoke not in whispers now, but in deep rumbles, in shattering echoes that rolled through the oceans and along the coasts. If there had been ears to hear, they would have known awe. If there had been hearts to feel, they would have known humility. For the quakes were reminders that the Earth was alive, that beneath the thin crust of stone, immense forces surged, shaping the world moment by moment. Over millions of years, the earthquakes became the punctuation of the planet's story, sudden bursts of power that broke the stillness, reminders of the mantle's ceaseless energy. They were unpredictable, but they were also inevitable, woven into the very fabric of tectonic motion. And though no life yet trembled at their arrival, the quakes were laying foundations for the ages to come. For every mountain lifted higher, there was a quake that marked the strain. For every ocean basin widened, there was a quake that tore the crust apart. For every continent that drifted, there was a quake that reminded it the journey was not smooth. The earthquakes were not interruptions to creation. They were part of creation, the sudden heartbeat of a restless planet. In this silent world, the quakes rang out as the Earth's own music. Deep rumbles, sharp cracks, rolling waves of motion, all unheard, yet all essential. They were the Earth's way of saying, I am alive, I am moving, I am becoming. And so the Archean world trembled over and over again in silence. Stone fell into the sea, cliffs shattered, mountains shifted. No witnesses marked these moments, but their echoes were carved into the land, into the very bones of the continents. The earth quaked, and in its quaking, it shaped the face of the future. Though the oceans stretched wide, and the mountains rose raw against the haze of the Archean sky, much of the planet's greatest work was hidden. Beneath the surface, under layers of stone and sea, the Earth was building its foundation, a structure invisible to the eye, yet essential to everything that would follow. This was the unseen architecture of the Archean world, the secret scaffolding upon which continents, climates, and life itself would rest. Imagine peering beneath the drifting plates, past the crust, into the mantle that seethed below. There in the slow churn of molten rock, vast currents moved like rivers of fire. They rose in some places, pressing upward against the crust, tearing it open to form ridges and vents. They sank in others, dragging plates downward into the deep, recycling them into the furnace of the Earth's heart. These currents were not chaotic. They were steady, ordered, flowing in patterns shaped by heat and gravity. They were the hidden hands moving the plates above, the unseen geometry of a restless world. The architecture of the Archean was not a structure of stone walls or towering spires, but of processes. Subduction zones where plates slid beneath one another, spreading ridges where a new crust was born, hotspots where plumes of magma broke through to create islands. These features were invisible on the surface at the moment, but over time they shaped everything. Mountains, valleys, islands, oceans, all were the result of this unseen design, this slow sculpting from below. Picture yourself standing on a craton, that ancient heart of a continent. Beneath your feet, unseen but always present, the roots of the land stretch deep into the mantle. These roots are thick and solid, anchoring the crust like the base of a tree. They spread downward for hundreds of kilometers, stabilizing the land above. Without them, the continents would drift like fragile rafts, too easily broken, too easily lost. But with them, they endured. These deep roots were part of the unseen architecture, giving the Earth its first sense of permanence. And yet permanence did not mean stillness. The architecture was dynamic, always shifting, always responding to the currents of the mantle. When two plates collided, the unseen structure buckled, folding and thrusting upward into mountains. When plates pulled apart, the architecture stretched, tearing open cracks for new stone to form. Even the stable cratons, those enduring fragments, were shaped by the hidden hand of the mantle, their roots strengthened by the same processes that threatened to undo them. The oceans, too, owed their form to this architecture. Their basins were carved by the stretching and sinking of plates, their depths determined by the unseen tug of subduction zones. Even the ridges that split the seafloor, glowing lines of volcanic birth, were expressions of the mantle's hidden design. The Earth's architecture was not built on the surface, but in the deep, and the surface was only its reflection. There is a comfort in imagining this. Though the Archean world seemed chaotic, with volcanoes erupting, earthquakes shaking, and continents drifting, beneath it all was order, a rhythm, a pattern, a geometry as elegant as it was powerful. The unseen architecture of the Earth was not random. It was a design that balanced creation and destruction, growth and loss, fire and water. To the microbes that clung to vents and rocks, this architecture was invisible, yet it sustained them. Without subduction, there would be no renewal of minerals. Without ridges, no spreading of nutrients. Without hotspots, no islands to form the cradles of shallow seas. The smallest of lives were tied to the largest of forces, bound in a relationship they could never see. And even today, billions of years later, the echoes of this architecture remain. The continents we stand upon, the mountains we climb, the valleys we inhabit, all of them are shaped by the same unseen hand. The mantle still flows, the plates still drift, the deep roots still anchor the land. What began in the Archean as hidden architecture has become the framework of the entire world. It is humbling to realize that so much of the Earth's story is invisible. We see the mountains, the rivers, the coastlines, and we call them landscapes. But beneath them lies a deeper truth that the Earth is not only surface, but depth. Not only what we see, but what we cannot see. Its architecture is written in silence, in processes too slow for eyes to follow, in movements measured not in years, but in eons. The Archean taught the Earth how to build in secret, to shape its world from the inside out, to create permanence beneath chaos, to weave a framework so strong it would endure for billions of years. And though no witness stood to marvel at it then, we walk upon its work every day. This was the unseen architecture of the Archean, the hidden blueprint of a restless, living planet. The Archean Earth was never still. It lived in rhythms, in endless loops of building and breaking, of rising and falling. To gaze upon the planet in this age was to see a world in constant motion, a place where creation and destruction were not opposites, but partners, woven together into the very fabric of existence. Every mountain that rose was destined to crumble. Every ocean basin that opened was fated to close. Every island born of fire would one day sink beneath the waves. The Earth story was not a straight line, but a cycle, and it was within these cycles that the planet found its balance. Imagine the seafloor at a spreading ridge, where magma poured upward from the mantle in glowing rivers. Their new crust was created daily, hardened into stone beneath the oceans. It was the Earth's act of birth, constant and patient. The planet never tired of making more new ridges, new basins, new islands, all born from the ceaseless flow of molten rock. This was creation in its rawest form, a steady heartbeat of growth pulsing from the Earth's deep interior. But creation did not stand alone. At the edges of the plates, where continents collided and oceans narrowed, the other half of the cycle unfolded. Old crust was dragged downward into the mantle, swallowed by the planet that had birthed it. Entire regions of seafloor vanished into the depths, crumpled and folded, melted into the fire. Mountains rose from these collisions, but just as often they fell, eroded by waves, pulled back beneath the earth. This was destruction, but it was not wasteful. It was renewal, the recycling of stone into fire, the endless loop of becoming. Picture yourself standing at the boundary of such a cycle. On one side, land lifts upward, ridges breaking the surface into new peaks. On the other, the ground sinks, collapsing into the sea lost to the mantle. You would hear the roar of waves against cliffs, the hiss of lava pouring into water, the groan of stone under strain. Creation and destruction play out side by side, inseparable, each feeding the other. Without one, the other could not exist. And in this dance, the earth grew stronger. The continents that endured did so because they had roots, cratons hardened by countless cycles of collision and renewal. The oceans deepened, widened, and shifted, shaped by basins opening and closing in endless succession. Even the mountains, though they fell, left behind their cores of granite and basalt, the bones of ranges that would rise again. The cycles built resilience into the planet, ensuring that nothing was permanent but changed itself. Life, though still small and fragile in this age, was already a child of these cycles. Microbes fed on the minerals released by vents, minerals born from crust, drawn back into the mantle, and released again through fire. Shallow seas enriched by volcanic ash became nurseries for new chemical reactions, for fragile chains of molecules learning to persist. Destruction, far from ending the story, nourished it. Without the cycles of breaking and renewal, there would have been no food for life, no warmth, no energy. Life itself was shaped by the Earth's willingness to both create and undo. There is a quiet lesson in this rhythm. We often think of destruction as an ending, something final, but in the Archean, endings were beginnings. A mountain crumbled, and its dust became sand spread along the shores. An island sank, and its fragments enriched the sea. A plate vanished into the mantle, and its melting gave birth to new crust elsewhere. Nothing was lost, everything was transformed. Imagine the patience of these cycles. They played out not over days or years, but over millions upon millions of years. Creation was slow, destruction was slow, but together they filled the eons with motion. If you could watch the Earth in time-lapse, you would see continents colliding and breaking apart like drifting clouds, mountains swelling and shrinking like the breath of a giant, oceans opening and closing like great lungs inhaling and exhaling. It was not chaos, it was rhythm, a steady pulse written into the heart of the planet. And that rhythm endures even now. Every earthquake, every volcanic eruption, every shifting plate is part of the same cycle that began in the Archean. The continents beneath our feet are survivors of that ancient dance, shaped and reshaped countless times. The mountains we climb today carry within them the memory of older peaks, long crumbled into dust. The oceans we sail were born from fractures in the seafloor, healed and reborn again and again. We live in the middle of cycles that will outlast us, cycles as old as the Earth itself. In the Archean, the Earth taught itself the art of balance. To create was to destroy was to create. The two were not enemies, but partners, bound together in an eternal dance. The cycles of creation and destruction were not accidents, but the very nature of a living planet. And so the world spun on, restless but steady, patient but unyielding, its surface shaped and reshaped with every age. From fire and fracture, from collapse and renewal, the Earth wrote its story in stone. And though no life yet gazed upon it with wonder, the cycles whispered a promise that nothing truly ends, that every ending is only another beginning. Amid the endless cycles of creation and destruction, amid the quakes and eruptions, something remarkable was being forged in silence. Deep within the Archean Earth, certain pieces of land grew stronger than the rest. They resisted the pull of the mantle, they endured the battering of waves and quakes, they survived where other fragments vanished back into the fire. These were the cratons, the ancient, stable cores of continents, forged quietly in the heat and pressure of deep time. To imagine a craton is to imagine the very bones of the Earth. Unlike the fragile volcanic islands that rose and fell within a few million years, the cratons endured. They were thicker, heavier, and their roots stretched deep into the mantle, anchoring them with a stability that the rest of the crust lacked. They were like stones at the bottom of a river. While everything else shifted and flowed around them, they held their place, enduring against the current. Picture the process of their birth. When plates collided, mountains rose and molten rock pooled deep below the surface. Over millions of years, the pressure and heat transformed these rocks, hardening them into something tougher than before. Layers of granite and basalt fused together, and the roots of the land sank deeper, thickening the crust until it became nearly unshakable. The Earth, in its ceaseless motion, had stumbled upon permanence. Now imagine standing upon one of these newborn cratons. The land beneath you is different from the restless volcanic islands that surround it. Here, the ground feels solid, steady, less prone to the trembling quakes that rattle the oceanic crust. The rocks are old, even in their youth, hardened into vast shields of granite. They rise as barren plateaus, flat and wide, with only jagged ridges breaking the horizon. No trees soften them, no grass rolls across their slopes. They are naked stone, immense and enduring. The oceans crash at their edges, but the cratons do not yield easily. Their deep roots anchor them against the waves, against the pull of the mantle below. Storms wear at their surfaces, rains, when they fell, dissolved their minerals, and quakes rattled their foundations, yet the cratons held firm. Unlike the fleeting islands that appeared and disappeared in the blink of a geologic eye, the cratons became the Earth's memory, carrying the story of the Archean forward into every age that followed. And indeed, some of them remain with us even now. Beneath Greenland, beneath Canada, beneath Australia and Africa, the ancient cratons of the Archean still endure, billions of years old. Their stones have outlasted oceans, mountains, even entire supercontinents. They are among the oldest things you can touch on this Earth, fragments of the Archean world, still here, still telling their story. The quiet forge of the cratons was not a single moment, but a long and patient process. Over millions upon millions of years, collisions thickened the crust, heat baked it, and pressure hardened it. Every cycle of destruction added new layers to their strength. Every mountain that crumbled, every plate that sank, contributed to their deep foundations. The cratons were not simply born, they were crafted, hammered into permanence by the rhythms of the Earth. And they were more than just stone. They were the stage upon which life would someday flourish. Along their coasts, shallow seas gathered, warm and rich with minerals. In their sheltered bays, microbes found havens to grow. On their surfaces, weathering slowly released nutrients into the oceans, feeding the chemistry of life. The cratons were more than anchors of the continents. They were cradles, offering stability in a world of chaos. There is comfort in imagining them this way. In a time when the Earth seemed endlessly restless, when quakes shook the land and volcanoes roared without pause, there were places that endured. Quiet places, stable and firm, where the Earth paused in its endless reshaping. To stand upon a craton was to stand upon permanence, to feel the steady heartbeat of the planet beneath your feet. The cratons remind us that even in the midst of chaos, the Earth was always searching for balance. Not every landmass was doomed to crumble. Not every mountain was fated to fall. Some would last, carrying their strength forward into the farthest reaches of time. These were the Earth's anchors, its first lasting bones, its silent memory etched in granite. And so, in the Archean, amid fire and fracture, amid oceans that shifted endlessly and mountains that rose only to vanish, the cratons endured. Forged quietly, without spectacle, they became the foundation of the continents we know today. The Earth, restless though it was, had finally begun to learn permanence. While the cratons anchored themselves deep into the Earth, while mountains rose and quakes reshaped the coasts, another voice joined the great conversation of the Archean world. It was the voice of the oceans, vast and tireless, answering back to the fire and stone with its own rhythm. The seas did not merely cover the Earth, they spoke to it, shaped it, balanced it, in an endless dialogue that continues even now. Imagine standing at the edge of an Archean shoreline. Before you lays not a quiet blue sea, but a restless expanse stretching beyond sight. The waters are darker than ours today, stained with iron and minerals drawn from the deep. They shimmer with strange hues beneath the dim sun, copper and green mingling with silver and gray. Their surface is rarely still. Tides, driven by a moon far closer than it is now, surge and retreat with immense force. Waves pound the jagged coasts, dragging fragments of volcanic rock back into the depths, only to return with new debris. Each crash of wave upon stone is part of the dialogue. The land rises, the ocean answers, carving cliffs, shaping beaches, smoothing jagged edges into pebbles and sand. The land resists, and the sea insists, until both are transformed. Over millions of years, this endless back and forth draws the first outlines of continents, the first true coastlines upon the face of the Earth. But the conversation does not end at the surface. Deep below, at spreading ridges and venting chimneys, the ocean speaks in another language. Here, water seeps into cracks of the seafloor, is heated by magma, and returns to the ocean enriched with minerals. Iron, sulfur, magnesium, and countless other elements billow into the currents, drifting outward. The oceans carry these gifts across the globe, redistributing the Earth's breath, spreading nourishment for the fragile beginnings of life. Picture these currents winding through the deep. They move slowly, steadily, like veins in a great body. They circle the continents, rise to the surface, then sink again into the abyss. With each cycle, they carry whispers from one place to another, the warmth of vents, the minerals of mountains, the gases of volcanoes. The oceans are not passive, they are active, alive in their own way, keeping the Earth's chemistry in motion. And the land listens. Along coasts and shallow seas, the waves deposit layers of sediment, building new ground from the debris of the old. In tidal pools, water evaporates under the sun, leaving behind crystals and minerals for chemistry to play with. Rain, when it came, washed nutrients from the land into the sea, feeding the dialogue further. Each element that entered the ocean joined its vast conversation, spread far and wide by currents until the whole planet shared in the exchange. For life, this dialogue was everything. Microbes drifting in the seas depended on the ocean's ability to carry nutrients to them. Those clinging to rocks near the coasts thrived on minerals washed from the land. Those clustered around deep vents flourished because the ocean carried away waste and brought in new food. The dialogue between fire, stone, and water created not only the shape of the planet, but also the conditions in which life could grow. There is a gentle poetry in this endless exchange. The land never ceased to push upward, and the oceans never ceased to wear it down. The Earth never stopped exhaling gases and minerals, and the seas never stopped carrying them away. It was not a battle, but a conversation, a give and take, a rhythm that balanced creation and erosion, warmth and coolness, depth and surface. Over millions of years, the dialogue deepened. As continents grew larger, the seas adjusted, rising and falling with each shift of land. As mountains lifted, rivers of sediment flowed into the oceans, layering the seafloor with records of the land above. As vents erupted, the oceans swirled their minerals into circulation, enriching every corner of their vastness. The seas were not silent observers of the Earth's changes. They were partners, shaping the story as much as fire and stone. And they still are. Even today, every wave that crashes upon a cliff, every current that circles the globe, every tide that rises and falls, is part of this same dialogue. The oceans still carry the breath of volcanoes, still wear down mountains, still cradle life in their vast depths. The conversation that began in the Archean has never ended. It has only grown richer, more complex, as life joined its voice to the chorus. In the Archean, though, it was a simpler song. Fire rose, water cooled it. Land lifted, oceans wore it down. Minerals spilled, currents carried them onward. In this balance, the planet found its rhythm, a rhythm so steady that it has lasted for billions of years. The oceans spoke, and the earth answered, and together they wrote the world we know today. The Archean Earth was never cold in spirit, though the young sun above was fainter than it is today. Its rays, weaker by nearly a third, should have left the oceans frozen, the lands locked in ice, the planets silent and still. And yet the Earth remained warm, its seas unfrozen, its face alive with motion. The reason for this paradox lay not in the heavens, but deep within the Earth itself. It was the planet's own fires, volcanic and tectonic, that kept the world alive with warmth. Imagine the landscape. Across the drifting cratons and newborn mountains, volcanoes rose like sentinels, smoking and glowing with hidden fire. Some erupted in fountains of lava that poured down into the seas, their heat sending up clouds of steam that drifted into the hazy air. Others rumbled quietly for centuries, exhaling constant streams of gas into the atmosphere. Each plume carried carbon dioxide, methane, and water vapor, greenhouse gases that wrapped the Earth in a blanket, holding close to the little warmth the sun provided. Without these gases, the planet would have been a frozen orb, its oceans locked in silence, its potential for life extinguished before it began. But with them, the Earth remained temperate. Its seas churned, its tides surged, and its coasts warmed beneath the hazy, mineral-rich skies. The fires of the Earth, though fierce, were a gift of balance, keeping the planet alive. Picture standing on the edge of a volcanic plain during this age. The ground is warm beneath your feet, still cooling from flows of lava that hardened into black stone. All around, steam hisses from cracks in the earth, curling upward into the air. The horizon glows faintly with eruptions, distant mountains spilling light into the night. The atmosphere is thick, golden with haze, heavy with the earth's breath. And yet, in this harshness, there is comfort, for this is a world kept alive not by a generous sun, but by the fire within. The warmth of the Archean Earth came not only from volcanoes, but also from the ceaseless motion of its plates. Every time the crust cracked, every time magma surged upward through fractures, heat poured into the oceans. Hydrothermal vents exhaled warmth into the deep, creating pockets of energy where life could thrive. These vents did not simply enrich the oceans with minerals. They turned the cold abyss into a patchwork of warmth, a mosaic of possibilities scattered across the seafloor. Even the process of subduction, where plates slid into the mantle, contributed to this warmth. As the crust sank, it released water and gases into the fiery depths, fueling more eruptions, more vents, more exhalations of heat. The cycle fed itself endlessly, ensuring that fire was never far from water, that warmth was never absent from the seas. For life, this warmth was essential. Microbes clinging to vents depended on the constant flow of energy. In shallow tidal pools, the warmth of volcanic shores kept chemistry alive, allowing fragile molecules to combine and endure. The balance of heat and cold was delicate, but the Earth's fires ensured it was never lost. Even under a weaker sun, the planet's heart was strong enough to keep the spark of life alive. There is a strange coziness in this image, a world that seems violent to us, yet in truth was nurturing. Volcanoes roared, quakes shook, the skies were thick with haze, and yet all of this was comfort, protection, warmth. The Archean Earth was like a hearth, its fires feeding the cradle of life, its smoke wrapping the planet in shelter against the cosmic cold. And this fire was tireless. For millions of years, the planet exhaled its warmth, maintaining a balance that the sun could not yet provide. Each eruption, each vent, each plume of gas was part of a vast rhythm, a steady exhale that warmed the oceans and stabilized the climate. Without it, there would have been no shallow seas for microbes to thrive in, no coasts where chemistry could gather, no warmth for life to take root. Even today, echoes of this fire remain. The volcanoes that rise along modern coasts, the vents that breathe in the deep, the greenhouse gases that warm our skies, all are reminders of the Archean, of the time when the Earth learned to keep itself alive. The planet's fires were not accidents of geology. They were the heartbeat of a world determined to endure. And so the Archean rolled on, warmed by its own breath, comforted by its own fire. In the dialogue between sun and earth, It was the planet itself that spoke the louder voice, saying, "I will keep the seas alive. I will hold life close. I will burn, and in burning, I will protect." The fires that warmed the world were fierce, but they were also gentle in their gift. They were the great paradox of the Archean: destruction that gave shelter, violence that gave life, fire that became comfort. Life in the Archean was still small, still fragile, still unseen by any eye. It existed only as the tiniest of beings, single-celled, simple yet enduring. But though life was humble in form, its home was anything but quiet. The earth itself was a cradle, but it was not a still cradle. It was restless, rocked constantly by fire, water, and stone. And in this restlessness, life found its place. Imagine the young microbes, invisible specks clinging to rocks at the edge of a vent. Around them, the ocean boils with minerals and heat. Black plumes rise like smoke into the abyss, swirling nutrients into the currents. To us, this place might seem harsh, inhospitable, yet to the microbes it was abundance. Sulfur and iron fed them, heat sustained them, darkness sheltered them. They thrived not in spite of the Earth's restlessness, but because of it. Picture also the shallow pools along volcanic shores. The tides surged high, rushing across the stone, then fell away, leaving behind puddles warmed by the sun and enriched by gases from the land. Within these pools, molecules gathered, concentrated, dried, and were rehydrated with every cycle. It was a world in motion, a rhythm of filling and emptying, of heat and coolness, of storm and calm. Within this rhythm, chemistry found direction. Simple molecules became chains, chains became systems, and systems became life. The earth was never still. Quakes rattled the coasts, collapsing cliffs into the sea. Volcanoes erupted, pouring lava across the land and spilling ash into the skies. Oceans shifted as continents drifted, opening new basins and closing old ones. To modern eyes, such chaos might seem threatening, but for life, this chaos was an opportunity. Every quake exposed new minerals. Every eruption released gases. Every drifting of continents opened new shores and shallow seas. The planet's restlessness fed life endlessly, ensuring that no environment remained stagnant for long. There is a lesson in this, that life was not born from stillness, but from motion, from the ceaseless turning of cycles, from the breaking and remaking of stone, from the rising of fire and the falling of rain. The Archean Earth was a cradle, but it rocked violently, and in that rocking, life learned resilience. Imagine a microbe drifting in the ocean currents. It is carried from the depths to the shallows, from warmth to coolness, from one chemical-rich plume to another. It has no control, no plan, yet it endures. It clings where it can, multiplies where conditions allow, dies where it must. But always others rise to take its place. Slowly, invisibly, life spreads. It covers rocks in thin films, drifts through currents in invisible clouds, settles in cracks and pools. The cradle of life may be restless, but it is wide and generous. And in time, life began to shape the cradle that shaped it. Microbes exhaled gases into the water, changing its chemistry. They consumed minerals, altering the balance of the seas. They multiplied in such numbers that their presence became part of the earth itself. The dialogue between planet and life deepened. No longer was life only shaped by fire and water. It was beginning, in its quiet way, to shape fire and water in return. Think of how small these first creatures were, and yet how immense their impact would be. With every breath, every division, every molecule they altered, they changed the course of the Earth's history. They prepared the way for oxygen, for complexity, for everything that would follow. But here, in the Archean, they simply endured. That was enough. In their endurance, they carried forward the promise of life. There is a quiet coziness in imagining this. A planet vast and violent, and yet in the cracks and pools, in the shadows of vents, tiny lives go about their work. They do not notice the quakes, the eruptions, the drifting of continents. They do not need to. The planet rocks them in its restlessness, and they thrive in its motion. It is as though the earth itself is a mother, holding them close not in stillness, but in constant movement, rocking them toward the future. The restless cradle of life was not gentle, but it was nurturing. Fire, water, stone, and air all conspired to keep the planet alive, to keep the seas from freezing, to keep chemistry in motion, to provide endless opportunities for life to find its way. And so the earth did not fail. In its restlessness, it succeeded. In its chaos, it created. The cradle of life was never meant to be still. It was meant to move, to change, to surprise, to challenge. For in that restlessness lay the spark of endurance, the foundation of resilience, the gift of growth. And from this restless cradle, the long story of life began its endless unfolding. Time in the Archean did not flow as we know it now. To us, days are brief, years are measured, centuries are long. But in the Archean, time stretched vast and patient, flowing like an endless river. Millions of years passed as easily as moments. Continents drifted while oceans swelled. Mountains rose only to crumble again, all beneath the quiet gaze of the sun. This was the march of ages, slow, ceaseless, steady, and unstoppable. Imagine watching the Earth in a great time-lapse. The newborn cratons, those enduring cores of rock, drift across the globe like rafts on a restless sea. They approach one another, collide, fuse, then drift apart again, their journeys measured in hundreds of millions of years. Mountains rise in sharp peaks, only to be worn down into gentle plateaus. Volcanoes flare in sudden bursts of fire, then fall silent, leaving behind chains of islands that the oceans grind into dust. The Earth is always moving, always reshaping itself, though to the eye of a single moment, it might seem still. Now picture the oceans. Their tides surge and retreat, guided by a moon much closer to the Earth than today. Storms sweep across their surfaces, stirring minerals, scattering volcanic ash. Currents shift with the drift of continents, changing direction, changing temperature, always carrying whispers from one end of the globe to another. Across eons, the oceans never sleep. They are part of the march, shaping the land even as the land shapes them. The atmosphere, too, joins the procession. Born from volcanic breath, it thickens with carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrogen. It shields the Earth, traps warmth, and scatters sunlight into hues of copper and gold. Slowly, ever so slowly, it changes, each exhalation of microbes, each release of gas from vents, each plume from volcanoes altering its chemistry. Nothing is fixed. All is part of the march, the steady passage of ages. And life, though still small, is never absent from this rhythm. The first microbes cling to rocks near the coasts, multiplying silently in thin films. Others gather around the warmth of vents in the abyss, thriving on minerals carried upward from the mantle. They are so small as to be invisible, yet they endure through quakes, through eruptions, through continents shifting above them. Each generation is part of a chain stretching across unimaginable spans of time, linking the earliest beginnings to the distant future. There is a coziness in imagining this march, for though the Earth was restless, it was never hurried. Nothing was wasted, nothing rushed. A mountain might take tens of millions of years to rise, and just as long to fall. An ocean might open slowly over eons, then close again in equal patience. Even the continents themselves, vast and enduring, moved like dancers gliding across a floor, their steps deliberate, their rhythm unbroken. From our perspective, such slowness is almost beyond comprehension. But in the Archean, this slowness was life itself. It was the heartbeat of the planet, measured not in seconds or minutes, but in cycles of stone and sea. The march of ages was not something apart from the Earth. It was the Earth, its essence, its nature, its quiet promise that nothing ever truly stands still. If you could rest upon a craton through all those ages, you would feel it. The land beneath you would rise and fall, tilt and crack, shift and drift. Oceans would swallow coastlines, then retreat to reveal them again. Skies would thicken with haze, then clear, then haze again. And through it all, life would persist in its small, invisible ways, never ceasing, always carried along with the march. This endless passage was not aimless. Each cycle built upon the last. Each mountain that crumbled became sediment to form new land. Each ocean that closed enriched the mantle, feeding the birth of future ridges. Each generation of microbes laid the foundation for what would come next. The march of ages was not a circle, endlessly repeating, but a spiral, moving forward even as it turned through familiar patterns. And even now, billions of years later, we are part of this same march. The continents we stand upon were forged in those early cycles. The oceans we sail were shaped by the rhythms of Archean tides. The air we breathe is a descendant of the gases exhaled in those ancient days. The march has never stopped. It has only carried us along with it. The Archean reminds us that time is not to be measured only in days or years, but in vast, patient movements. It reminds us that change is not always sudden, that creation and destruction can unfold in rhythms too slow for eyes to see. And it comforts us with the knowledge that no matter how restless the world may seem, it is always part of a larger journey, the steady, unbroken march of ages. The Archean may seem impossibly distant, its mountains long worn away, its oceans reshaped, its skies transformed. And yet, though billions of years have passed since those restless days, the Earth still carries their memory. The echoes of the Archean are everywhere, in the continents we walk upon, in the minerals beneath our feet, in the very air we breathe. They are not whispers lost to the abyss of time, but resonances that continue to shape the present. Imagine standing in a quiet valley today, your feet upon granite bedrock. That stone, hard and ancient, may be part of a craton, one of those enduring fragments forged in the Archean. Beneath Greenland, beneath Canada, beneath Africa and Australia, these ancient roots remain, older than forests, older than animals, older even than the air we now depend upon. When you place your hand upon such stone, you are not merely touching rock. You are touching the memory of a world that existed nearly 4 billion years ago. The Archean speaks through its endurance. The echoes are found in iron too. Across the earth, bands of iron-rich stone, the famous banded iron formations, stretch for miles, layered like the pages of a book. These layers were first written in the Archean seas, when microbes began releasing oxygen, and iron dissolved in the oceans settled out into stone. To study them is to hear the first faint murmurs of life shaping the planet, life beginning to alter the chemistry of the world. These stones are echoes of that quiet revolution, preserved across billions of years. Even the continents themselves carry the Archean in their shapes. The roots of mountains, long since eroded away, lie buried deep beneath the land. The outlines of ancient collisions, the scars of vanished oceans, remain in the crust. Geologists read these scars as one reads lines in a palm, tracing the destiny of the Earth through the marks left behind. Every ridge, every fold, every mineral vein is a voice from the Archean, speaking softly but insistently. We were here first. We shaped what came after. And the echoes are not only in stone, they are in the very systems that sustain us. The carbon cycle, the exchange of gases between land, ocean, and air, it began in the Archean. The first atmosphere thick with volcanic gases set the stage for the greenhouse balance that continues even now. The ocean currents, the tides, the cycles of heat and cold that define climate, all were born in that restless era. Every breath we take is an echo of the Archean Earth learning how to breathe for the first time. Life itself carries the echoes most vividly. The DNA that stitches together every living being on this planet, from the smallest microbe to the tallest tree, from fish to birds to humankind, was first written in that age. It is a script refined across eons, but its foundation is Archean. The way cells divide, the way they draw energy from the world around them, the way they endure in times of hardship, all of it is rooted in the survival of those earliest microbes who clung to rocks, thrived in vents, and multiplied in shallow seas. Within our blood, within our breath, within our very being, the Archean still speaks. There is a comfort in these echoes. Though time is vast and we are fleeting, the world holds memory in its bones. We are never wholly separated from the deep past. Every mountain range we see is built upon the roots of older ranges. Every coastline we walk is carved from cycles that began billions of years ago. Every cell within us is a continuation of the invisible life that first found a way to endure in the Archean. We carry the echoes within us, even if we do not hear them. The Earth does not forget. The Archean may be hidden beneath layers of younger stone, its landscapes long gone, its skies long changed. But its patterns endure, its rhythms still shape the world, its whispers still move through the land, sea, and air. Each earthquake, each eruption, each drifting of a continent is not something new, but an echo of the same motions that began in that ancient time. The present is only the continuation of the past. And so, though the Archean belongs to deep time, it also belongs to us. It lingers beneath our feet, in the stones we build with, in the metals we shape, in the air we breathe, in the life we live. Its echoes ripple forward, reminding us that we are part of a story billions of years in the making. The march of ages has carried its voice to us, and still it continues onward into futures we cannot yet imagine. The echoes across time tell us this truth: nothing is ever truly lost. The Archean is not gone. It is alive in the continents, alive in the oceans, alive in the cells of every living being. It is alive in us. The Archean Earth was never hurried. It moved to a rhythm far slower than the beating of a heart, slower than the turning of seasons, slower even than the rise and fall of civilizations that would one day come. Its patience was vast, measured not in years or centuries, but in millions upon millions of years. To the earth, time was an ocean, and it drifted upon its waves without haste. This patience was its greatest strength, for it allowed the world to shape itself carefully, deliberately, without ever needing to rush. Imagine the building of a mountain. To us, a mountain feels eternal, towering over valleys and rivers as though it has always been there. But in the Archean, mountains rose grain by grain, fold by fold, pushed upward by collisions of plates over spans of time so long that no eye could ever witness the whole. What seemed motionless in the moment was, in truth, always moving, always becoming. Patience was the sculptor, and stone was its medium. Picture also the drift of continents. They moved at the pace of fingernails growing a few centimeters each year. And yet, given millions of years, they crossed entire oceans. They gathered to form larger masses, broke apart, wandered alone, then returned again to collide. Their journeys spanned ages beyond comprehension, but they never faltered. They moved with the quiet persistence of patience, a steady dance across the globe. Even life itself was a child of patience. The first microbes did not appear overnight, nor did they flourish instantly. They arose slowly, nurtured by cycles of heat and water, tested by quakes and eruptions, strengthened by countless failures before success. For billions of years, life remained small and simple, content to multiply quietly in oceans and pools. This slowness was not weakness, but wisdom. Life was learning endurance. It was learning to persist not for a moment, but for eternity. The Earth's patience was not passive. It was active, steady, deliberate. With every eruption, it released new gases into the air, altering the climate one breath at a time. With every quake, it reshaped the land, opening new coasts and closing old ones. With every cycle of creation and destruction, it added another layer to its story. The changes were small in the span of a day, but immense in the span of ages. The Earth knew no need for haste, for it had all of time to work with. There is a comfort in imagining this patience. In a world where storms raged, volcanoes roared, and oceans churned, there was still a deeper calm, a slower rhythm beneath it all. The Earth was never truly in chaos. It was never truly rushed. Its fires burned steadily, its plates drifted gently, its cycles unfolded with care. Even when mountains crumbled and oceans vanished, it was all part of a patient design, a story written over vast spans of time. If you could sit upon a craton and watch the world unfold, you would see this patience in motion. Mountains would rise around you, then wear down into plains. Oceans would open at your feet, then close again into folded ranges. Skies would change, thickening with haze, clearing, then thickening again. And yet, through all of it, the Earth would remain steady, never hurrying, never faltering, always moving forward at its chosen pace. Life learned from this patience. Microbes endured because they too adapted to slow change. They spread not by rushing, but by persisting, by holding on through cycles of upheaval. Their slowness became their strength, allowing them to outlast even the fiercest disruptions. In time, this patience would allow life to survive mass extinctions, ice ages, and catastrophes. The Archean taught life not how to grow quickly, but how to endure endlessly. The Earth's patience is still with us. Every mountain we see is part of a process that began long before us and will continue long after. Every coastline is being reshaped, grain by grain, wave by wave. Every forest, every plain, every desert is part of a slow story written in stone and soil. We may not see the changes in a single lifetime, but they are there, steady and certain, unfolding with the same calm persistence as in the Archean. The patient Earth teaches us that time is not an enemy, but a companion, that change need not be sudden to be profound, that endurance is as powerful as creation. In its patience, the Earth has shaped mountains, carved oceans, nurtured life, and carried its story forward for billions of years, and it will continue to do so long after we are gone. The Archean was the first chapter of this lesson. It was the age when the Earth found its rhythm, when it learned to shape itself slowly, carefully, and well. Its patience gave rise to continents, to oceans, to life itself. And in that patience lies the quiet strength of our planet, a strength that echoes still in every stone, in every wave, in every breath we take. By the close of the Archean, the Earth was no longer simply a ball of stone wrapped in oceans. It had become something more, something greater. Beneath its thin crust, its mantle still surged with fire, driving plates across the globe, raising mountains, spreading oceans. Above, its skis were thick with gases exhaled by countless volcanoes and the first stirrings of microbial life. Between, in the oceans and along the coasts, those tiny lives clung and multiplied, shaping the chemistry of the seas grain by grain, breath by breath. The planet had begun to feel alive, not just a world, but a living world. Imagine gazing at the Earth from afar in this age. It does not yet shine blue and green as it does today. Instead, its colors are deep and muted, seas of green-black, iron-rich waters, lands of dark volcanic stone, skies veiled in copper and gold haze. And yet within that veil, the planet is restless. Volcanoes dot the continents like fiery lanterns, their plumes rising high. Oceans churn with tides pulled by a nearer moon. The surface is alive with motion, but it is not only motion that defines it. Hidden in the depths, invisible to any eye, life is spreading. And with life, the Earth has taken its first steps into true living complexity. The planet itself moves as though it has a pulse. Earthquakes ripple through the crust, releasing energy like the beat of a heart. Volcanoes erupt in fiery exhalations, the Earth's own breath rising into the sky. Oceans circulate steadily, like blood flowing through the veins of a body, carrying heat and nutrients from one place to another. Even the atmosphere participates, wrapping the Earth in a blanket of gases that hold warmth close, like lungs exchanging breath with the surface below. Piece by piece, process by process, the Earth behaves less like a machine and more like something alive. For life itself, the Earth was not a backdrop but a partner. Microbes clung to vents in the deep, feeding on sulfur and iron. Others spread in shallow pools, adapting to tides and cycles of evaporation. They responded to the planet's rhythms, not resisting them but flowing with them. The Earth shook and they endured. The Earth erupted and they fed on its gifts. The Earth drifted its continents and they spread into the new spaces revealed. In time, they too began to shape the Earth, their metabolisms altering the oceans, their byproducts changing the atmosphere. The dialogue between planet and life deepened, a dialogue that would grow ever louder in the ages to come. There's a comfort in seeing the Earth this way, not as a cold stone, not as a fragile sphere adrift in the void, but as a being in its own right. Its tectonic plates are its bones and muscles, always shifting, always growing, always healing. Its oceans are its blood, flowing ceaselessly, carrying nutrients to every corner of the globe. Its atmosphere is its breath, exhaled through fire and through life, always changing, always renewing. And life itself is its spirit, its consciousness in embryo, the quiet hum that will one day grow into forests, animals, and voices that tell stories beneath the stars. The living Earth of the Archean was not yet the world we know, but the seeds of everything were there. The continents, though small, had begun their long journeys. The oceans, though strange in chemistry, already cradled life. The skies, though harsh, protected the planet and held warmth close. And within those seas and pools, microbes had begun the slow work of altering the air, laying the foundation for the great oxygenation yet to come. Every part of the Earth, from fire to stone to water to air, was part of one great system, alive and self-sustaining. This is what makes the Archean so profound. It was not only the age of drifting continents and ceaseless tectonics, it was the age when the Earth revealed itself as something greater than the sum of its parts. A restless planet became a living planet. A stage of stone and sea became a participant in its own story. The cycles of geology and the persistence of biology wove together into a single fabric, a single being that was more alive with every passing age. And that living planet has never ceased. Even now, billions of years later, the Earth moves and breathes in the same ways it did in the Archean. Its plates drift, its vents exhale, its oceans circulate, its atmosphere thickens and things in response to life. We who stand upon it are not separate from it. We are part of it, children of the same processes that stirred in the Archean, carriers of the same spark that began in those first microbial cradles. The Archean was the beginning of this truth. It was the chapter where the Earth found its voice, where its restlessness became rhythm, where its fire became warmth, where its silence became life. It was the moment when a world became not only a place, but a living presence, the living planet. The Archean Eon was an age unlike any other, an age of fire and water, of drifting stone and whispered beginnings. It was the time when the Earth learned to move, when tectonic plates began their slow, restless dance, when continents were born, when the oceans became laboratories of chemistry, and when life, small and invisible, found its first foothold. It was not a quiet time, but a time of deep rhythms. A time when every quake, every eruption, every tide was part of a grand symphony, the song of a planet awakening to itself. That song was not loud. It did not roar in the way storms roar, nor did it thunder like voices carried across mountains. Instead, it was subtle, a hum in the mantle, a whisper in the currents, a pulse in the quakes. It was a song beneath the stone, heard only by the patient, played only in the slowest measures of time. And yet, it was this song that shaped everything. Imagine listening to it. Beneath your feet, the ground vibrates softly, the deep murmur of the mantle pressing upward. Around you, the oceans answer, waves crashing against volcanic coasts, tides surging with the pull of the closer moon. Above, the skies shift with haze and light, the air thick with volcanic breath. Together, they form a harmony, stone, sea, sky, and fire, each adding its voice to the Earth's long music. And through it all, life listens. Microbes cling to rocks, to vents, to pools, responding to the rhythm. They do not know they are part of the song, yet their very existence becomes another note. Their breaths change the chemistry of the sea, their persistence alters the balance of the air. In time, their chorus will grow, reshaping the planet more profoundly than fire or stone. But in the Archean, they are only the faintest undertone, the first hint of melody woven into the Earth's great song. This song has never ended. Though the Archean passed into the Proterozoic, and the Proterozoic into the Phanerozoic, though mountains have risen and fallen, though oceans have opened and closed, the same rhythm continues. The plates still drift, the quakes still shake, the vents still breathe. Life still answers, reshaping air and stone, adding layers of complexity to the song. And we, though latecomers, are part of it too. Every breath we take, every step we place upon the ground, every story we tell is woven into the same rhythm that began nearly 4 billion years ago. There is a coziness in this truth, a comfort in knowing that we belong to something so vast and so old. The ground beneath our feet is not inert, but alive with memory. The oceans we sail carry whispers from ages past. The air we breathe is the gift of countless generations of life stretching back to the Archean. We are not separate from the Earth's song, we are its continuation. And when we listen closely, in the quiet of a mountain valley, in the roar of the sea, in the tremor of the ground, we can still hear it. The song is there, beneath the stone, beneath the oceans, beneath the silence of the sky. It is patient, steady, eternal. It tells us that the Earth is alive, that life is enduring, that time itself is not an enemy but a companion. The Archean Eon was the opening movement, the first stirring of this ancient music. It was the beginning of tectonic motion, of continents and oceans, of life's first whispers. It was the chapter in which the Earth found its rhythm, a rhythm that carries forward into every age, into every breath, into every heartbeat. And so the story rests, but the song continues. The Earth hums still, the mantle moves still, the oceans answer still. The microbes that first learned to endure have given rise to forests, rivers, animals, and people, and still the Earth holds us in its rhythm. We are the inheritors of the Archean's patience, the children of its fire, the singers of its echoes. The song beneath the stone is not only the story of the Earth, it is our story too, and it will play on, long after us, long after mountains rise and fall again, long after continents drift to new shapes, long after the seas rewrite their boundaries. It is the song of a living planet, a song begun in the Archean, a song that will never end.